The laughter from the living room echoed down the hallway, warm and alive. It was the kind of laughter that filled homes with love, except it never included Lena Walker. From her bedroom she could hear her mother's voice rising above the noise. "Oh, Claire, you're just brilliant. That presentation you gave, honestly, your company's lucky to have you." Then came her father's deep chuckle, the clinking of glasses, and her sister's confident tone. "I guess hard work pays off," Claire said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Lena turned another page of her book, pretending not to care, but the words blurred. Every sound of praise, every burst of laughter was a reminder of what she wasn't, the favorite. Where Claire's life sparkled, Lena's barely flickered. Her parents didn't mean to be cruel. They simply never noticed how much it hurt to be invisible. At dinner that evening, her father tried to start small talk. "So, Lena, how's that coding thing going? Still playing around on your computer?" Her mother chuckled softly. "Oh, Peter, she's always been a bit of a dreamer. But it's good she has a hobby." Lena forced a smile, her fork hovering above her plate. "It's not a hobby, Dad. I'm working on a data learning project. I think it could actually—" Claire interrupted, flipping her perfect blonde hair. "Oh, that's cute, Lena. You always have little projects." The table erupted in polite laughter. Lena's hand tightened around her fork. She wanted to disappear. That night, she sat on her bed staring at the family portrait hanging above her desk. In the photo, everyone was smiling. Except her. Her mother's arm wasn't even touching her shoulder. She hadn't noticed that before. A few weeks later came the text that broke something inside her. "Mom, hey sweetie, about the family reunion next month. I think maybe you should sit this one out. You never seem comfortable at those things, and I don't want you feeling awkward again. Love you." Lena read it 3 times. The words "sit this one out" burned in her chest. She tried to tell herself it wasn't malicious, that maybe her mother was just trying to be kind. But the truth was clear. They didn't want her there. Her sister Claire would host the reunion, full of charming laughter, elegant dresses, and champagne toasts. Lena wouldn't even be mentioned. That night, she opened her laptop and stared at the lines of code from her unfinished project. The blue light reflected the tears on her cheeks. "Too awkward," she whispered to herself. "Too embarrassing." But then, something inside her shifted. She wiped her eyes, closed her phone, and whispered again, this time steady and sure. "Fine, you don't want me there? Then you'll never see me coming." From that night on, Lena poured herself into her work. Her life became a rhythm of sleepless nights, empty coffee cups, and endless lines of code. She studied algorithms, machine learning, and data systems like her life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. Every cruel comment, every family gathering she wasn't invited to, she stored it all away like fuel. She promised herself that one day, she'd build something so extraordinary that even the people who ignored her would have to notice. One evening, while scrolling through social media, she saw photos from the family reunion. Claire was in the center, holding a glass of champagne, laughing under twinkling lights. Her parents stood beside her. Proud smiles plastered across their faces. The caption read, "Family, where love begins and never ends." Lena stared at the screen for a long time. Then, instead of crying, she smiled bitterly. If that was what family meant to them, a show for the camera, a performance of perfection, then she wanted no part of it. She closed the app, turned back to her screen, and began to type. As the code scrolled down her monitor, the hum of her computer filled the silence that had once been so lonely. But tonight, it sounded different. It sounded like purpose. Days turned into weeks, and Lena rarely left her apartment. Friends texted, worried about her, but she brushed them off. She didn't need parties or reunions. She needed progress. Each small success in her coding projects felt like a tiny rebellion against the family that called her embarrassing. Each working algorithm whispered, "You're not awkward. You're extraordinary." And when exhaustion threatened to crush her, she remembered her mother's message. "You never seem comfortable at those things." Good, Lena thought. Let them have their comfort. I'll have my future. One night, the rain hammered against her window while her laptop glowed in the dark. She leaned back, exhausted but proud. She had just finished a breakthrough in her AI pattern recognition model. Her chest swelled with something she hadn't felt in years, pride. Maybe she wasn't the daughter they bragged about. Maybe she'd never be the one they toasted at dinner, but she was becoming something else, something greater, someone who didn't need their approval anymore. Lena closed her eyes and made herself one quiet promise. Someday they'll remember the daughter they left out. But by then it'll be too late. And for the first time in years, she smiled as she fell asleep. Not with hope of being included, but with a calm certainty of someone who had finally stopped begging for a seat at the table. She would build her own table, and the world would come to sit at it. The soft blue glow of Lena's laptop became her only companion. Days blurred into nights, and nights into quiet dawns filled with the tapping of keys. She wasn't chasing approval anymore. She was chasing mastery. While others went out on weekends, Lena stayed home, her fingers moving over the keyboard like a pianist playing a secret symphony. Every error message, every bug she fixed, every breakthrough, it all became part of her silent war. The war to prove, not to her family, but to herself, that she was enough. By her late 20s, Lena's skills had grown sharper than she'd ever imagined. She had taught herself machine learning, neural networks, and predictive algorithms. But knowledge without opportunity was like a bird without wings. She needed something more. Something that could take her work beyond her tiny apartment and into the world. That opportunity came in the most unexpected way. It was at a late-night hackathon, one of those caffeine-fueled events filled with ambitious coders and glowing screens. Lena almost didn't go. Crowds made her uncomfortable, but something told her to try. She walked in quietly, laptop tucked under her arm, surrounded by teams laughing and brainstorming like old friends. She felt out of place until she heard a voice beside her. "Need a teammate?" She turned. A tall man in a gray hoodie, dark hair slightly messy, extended his hand with an easy smile. "I'm Ethan, working on an AI model for cognitive data mapping. You?" "Lena," she said softly. "Pattern recognition, kind of the same field." "Perfect," he said, grinning. "Then we're on the same wavelength." For the first time in years, someone didn't talk over her. He talked to her. They spent the next 48 hours side by side, coding through exhaustion and laughter. When their project won first place, Ethan turned to her, eyes bright. "You're brilliant, Lena. You know that, right?" She blinked, unsure how to respond. No one had ever said that to her without sarcasm. He continued, "I'm building a company, Mindstream Labs. We're developing adaptive AI systems. I could really use someone like you." Her chest tightened, excitement mixed with disbelief. "Are you serious?" "Completely," he said. "You're exactly the kind of person I want by my side." Lena joined Mindstream Labs the next week. What started in a small co-working space quickly became her second home. There were no judgmental eyes, no cruel comparisons, just people who cared about ideas, and Ethan. He was different from anyone she'd known. Confident but kind, ambitious but patient. He didn't just value her mind, he respected her silence. When others filled meetings with noise, Ethan would glance at her and say, "Lena's been thinking, let's hear her idea." And she would speak, hesitantly at first, then with growing assurance, while the room listened. For the first time, her words mattered. Their friendship deepened over months of long nights and caffeine-fueled coding sessions. They debated algorithms, shared late dinners, and sometimes just sat in quiet understanding. Ethan often joked, "You know, we're like binary code, 1 and 0, opposites that only make sense together." She laughed, really laughed. Something she hadn't done in a long time. When their first product launch went live, investors took notice. Lena's algorithm, designed to analyze human decision-making patterns, became the backbone of their platform. Within a year, Mindstream Labs had grown from 2 people and a dream into a multi-million-dollar startup, attracting global attention. Magazines began mentioning Ethan Cole's name in the tech world, but whenever he was interviewed, he always said the same thing: "The genius behind this company isn't me. It's Lena Walker." Each time she read those words, her heart swelled with gratitude and something warmer, something she didn't dare name. One night, after another successful pitch meeting, Ethan walked her to her car. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, and she could see his reflection in the window. "You ever think about how far you've come?" he asked softly. Lena smiled faintly. "Sometimes. Mostly I just think about how far I still want to go." He laughed quietly. That's what I love about you. You're never satisfied with good enough." The word love hung in the air, unspoken but understood. As Mindstream Labs grew, so did their bond. They traveled to conferences, stayed in late-night airports, and celebrated small victories like family. Ethan became her closest friend, her greatest supporter, and eventually, the person who made her believe she was worthy of more than survival. She no longer needed her family's validation. Ethan's quiet admiration and the success she had built from nothing were enough to fill that empty space they'd left. But sometimes, late at night, Lena would still scroll through her phone, seeing old photos of family reunions. Her mother, her father, Claire, smiling, glowing, pretending to be perfect. She didn't feel envy anymore, only distance. They had chosen not to see her value. And now her value had become something too bright for them to even comprehend. Months later, while sitting across from Ethan during another brainstorming session, he looked at her thoughtfully. "You know, Lena, there's something poetic about you. You were the quietest person in the room, and now the world's going to have to listen." She smiled, small but genuine. "I don't want the world to listen," she said. "I just want to build something that lasts." Ethan tilted his head, his expression softening. "Then we'll build it together." And they did. Line by line, code by code, brick by digital brick, the awkward invisible girl her family left behind was transforming into a visionary, and she wasn't just building systems anymore. She was building an empire born from silence, and soon the world would know her name. It started with a sunrise. Lena was sitting by the floor-to-ceiling window of her penthouse apartment, sipping coffee as the first light of dawn painted the city gold. Below her, the skyline buzzed with ambition, the same kind of hunger she had lived with for years. But for once, she wasn't thinking about algorithms or deadlines. She was thinking about Ethan, the man who saw her when no one else did, the one who looked past her quietness and found brilliance. He'd been dropping hints for weeks: dinners under fairy lights, late-night drives by the coast, long stares that said more than words ever could. But Lena had learned not to expect grand gestures. Life rarely gave her those. That's why, when she found a small black box sitting on her desk beside a single note, her breath caught. The note read, "Every system needs its foundation. You've always been mine." She opened the box. Inside was a delicate ring, simple but breathtaking. Tears blurred her vision as Ethan walked in, smiling nervously. "Before you say anything," he murmured, stepping closer, "I know you don't like attention or crowds. But I couldn't wait another day." Lena laughed softly, the sound trembling between joy and disbelief. "Ethan, yes. Yes, of course." He exhaled with relief, pulling her into his arms as the morning sun spilled over them. For a moment, she wasn't the girl who'd been excluded, mocked, or ignored. She was just loved. Planning the wedding should have been chaos. But Ethan knew her too well. "No big guest list," he promised. "Just people who truly care about us." And he meant it. They decided on an intimate ceremony in Tuscany, surrounded by soft hills, ancient villas, and the kind of quiet beauty that mirrored their story. Lena's assistant tried to ask about her family, but she waved it off. "No invitations," she said calmly. "They made it clear years ago that I make them uncomfortable. I won't ruin their peace, and they won't ruin mine." It wasn't anger anymore. It was detachment, the kind that comes only after healing. The day of the wedding felt like something out of a dream. The air smelled of lavender and freshly baked bread. The stone courtyard was draped in white silk and blush roses. Guests were few but genuine. Their colleagues, friends, mentors, people who had witnessed her rise and respected her heart. When Lena stepped out in her gown, a flowing ivory dress with soft lace that shimmered in the golden light, everyone fell silent. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He whispered as she approached, "You look like everything I ever wanted to believe in." The vows were simple, intimate, and real. "I used to think being loved meant being perfect," Lena said, her voice trembling slightly. "But you showed me that love is quiet, patient, and steady, the way code runs in the background, making everything work." Ethan smiled through tears. "And you showed me that brilliance doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be true." When they kissed, the wind picked up, scattering petals across the courtyard. The applause was soft, the joy genuine. Later that night, as music played under the string lights, Lena stood at the edge of the terrace, looking over the rolling fields bathed in moonlight. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You're quiet," he whispered. "Are you thinking about them?" Lena hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe a little. I used to dream of what it would be like to have them here. But now," she sighed. "Now I realize I never needed their applause. I just needed to stop waiting for it." He kissed the side of her head. "Then this, us, it's your new beginning." She smiled faintly. "Yes, my own family. One that I chose." A few days later, as their honeymoon began along the Italian coast, her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. "Mom, hi sweetheart. We heard from Claire you got married? Is that true? Why didn't you tell us?" Lena stared at the screen for a long moment. She could almost hear her mother's voice, polished, performative, pretending to care. She typed back one short reply. "Because you made it clear I didn't belong in the family." I finally listened. And she left it at that. No explanations, no guilt. She turned her phone off and slipped it into her bag, letting the sea breeze carry away years of pain. Over the next weeks, she and Ethan returned to San Francisco, where Mindstream Labs was booming. Investors were calling. Partnerships were forming. They were building something massive, something that could change the landscape of artificial intelligence. But behind every meeting, every business success, Lena carried a quiet peace. She no longer needed to prove herself to the people who never believed in her, because she had built a new circle, one filled with respect, laughter, and love. A few months later, as autumn painted the city in gold, Lena and Ethan framed one of their wedding photos. In it, she was laughing, genuinely laughing, her head tilted back, sunlight dancing on her hair. Ethan smiled as he hung it in their office. "You know," he said softly, "you don't look awkward at all." She chuckled. "Guess I just needed the right company." He pulled her close, whispering, "The right company, the right love, and the right purpose." And for the first time in her life, Lena felt it, the wholeness she had chased for years. No apologies, no begging for inclusion. Her life was her own, and it was more beautiful than any reunion she'd ever been excluded from. She didn't know it yet, but soon the world would see her face on magazine covers and business headlines. Soon, the same family that once ignored her would stand in disbelief at what she'd become. But tonight, under the soft glow of the city lights, she didn't care about fame or revenge. She cared only about this, the calm, quiet joy of finally belonging to herself. And that was enough. The world changed faster than Lena could process. In just 6 months, Mindstream Labs exploded across global markets. Their AI platform revolutionized data processing for tech, healthcare, and finance. And Lena Walker's name was suddenly everywhere. Business magazines called her the silent visionary. Tech blogs hailed her as the brain behind the boom. And then, one bright Monday morning, she woke up to see her face on the cover of Forbes. Smiling beside Ethan, both radiant under the headline, "The Power Couple Redefining Artificial Intelligence." She stared at the photo for a long moment, her eyes sparkling, her smile serene. For a girl who was once too awkward and embarrassing to invite to a family reunion, it felt poetic. The story inside painted her as a self-made prodigy, the woman who turned rejection into revolution. But what moved her most wasn't the fame. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had become everything they said she couldn't. That night, she and Ethan celebrated with champagne in their new mansion overlooking the San Francisco Bay, a sleek, glass-walled masterpiece that glowed like a lighthouse in the fog. As city lights shimmered below, Ethan raised his glass. To the woman who built her empire from silence. Lena laughed softly. To the man who believed in her when no one else did. They clinked glasses. For the first time, she truly felt untouchable, not in arrogance, but in peace. A few days later, it happened. The knock on the door. It was a quiet afternoon. Lena had been reviewing contracts when the sound echoed through the marble halls. 3 slow knocks, familiar but foreign. She walked to the grand entrance, her heels clicking against polished stone. Through the glass, she froze. Her parents stood there, dressed impeccably as always, their faces stretched into awkward smiles. Beside them stood Claire, holding a bouquet of white lilies, her expression painted with false warmth. For a brief second, Lena felt her chest tighten, the ghost of old pain flickering like a candle. then it vanished.